But because he's now suffering from an impaired memory, as you so delicately put it, he got away with it. Is that fair? You also expressed concern that prospective jurors would be persuaded by President Biden's presentation as a sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Your assessment, however, was focused on how President Biden would currently present to a jury if he stood trial. Is that correct?
That was an element of my explanation to the Attorney General for my decision. It was not the only element.
Okay, that wasn't my question, but it was one of the things that we were considering was his current state of mind, his current memory. Correct?
One of the things that I considered would be how, if a trial, whenever a trial theoretically were to be held, how President Biden would present himself to the jury if he elected to testify.
Okay. You did not compare President Biden's current memory or condition with his memory or condition when he was in the Senate or when he left the vice presidency and took the classified documents subject to your investigation. Is that right?
Actually, I believe that's not correct, Congresswoman. One of the things that's in the report is an assessment of the president's memory based on recordings from the 2016-2017 timeframe, recordings of conversations between Mr. Biden and his ghostwriter, and comparing that with the president's memory that he exhibited during our interview of him in October of 2023. So there was a comparison there.
Okay, so, but unless there was some issue undisclosed to the American people during his 50 years in office, you found that Mr. Biden fully understood his legal responsibility related to the handling of classified materials, which is why you concluded in your report that Mr. Biden, quote, willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen. You state that on page 1, correct?
I believe that what I stated on page 1 was that we identified evidence that Mr. Biden willfully retained classified information after the end of his vice presidency, but ultimately we concluded that the evidence was insufficient to warrant.
I understand that. Please listen to my question. What I'm getting at is that Mr. Biden fully understood that he could not keep classified information at his home as both a former senator and vice president. Isn't that right? He understood that, correct?
My understanding is that based on the evidence, my assessment was that a jury...
That isn't what my question was. Please listen to my question. My question was that Mr. Biden understood when he was a senator and vice president that he could not keep classified materials at his home, at his garage, and in other offices. Is that fair?
I don't think that's accurate, Congresswoman, because when Mr. Biden was vice president, he was authorized to have classified material in his home.
But after he left, he knew that he was not entitled to keep classified information at his home, correct?
After he left, there is evidence to suggest that he knew that he could not legally have classified information in his home. However, there is evidence with respect to his notebooks that he believed he was authorized to keep the notebooks at home based on precedent.
Based on precedent. You know, I guess the way that I would put it is this. President Biden knew better. He knew that he wasn't entitled to keep these documents from when he was a senator, and he knew he wasn't entitled to keep these documents after he had left the vice presidency. But because he's now suffering from an impaired memory, as you so delicately put it, he got away with it. Is that fair?
Congresswoman, what I stated in my report is that there's certainly evidence that some jurors could infer to suggest that Mr. Biden willfully retained and disclosed national defense information. But in my judgment, the likely outcome of a trial, the probable outcome of a trial, is not a conviction.
I have represented a variety of clients over the years in actions against the federal government over, in fact, several decades of time. It's been my experience that the federal government, the DOJ specifically, has essentially unlimited resources to go after and prosecute citizens and will spare absolutely no expense in doing so. It has also been my experience that the DOJ is not only overly aggressive in these cases, but makes it clear that part of the reason for such aggression is to make an example of the poor soul who is the subject of such action. In other words, so that other people will not engage in the same kind of conduct. Mr. Hur, having been a long-term DOJ prosecutor, can you please explain why those people without the last name of Clinton or Biden are typically treated quite differently and seem to be the only ones who are never held accountable for violating the law?